Whiteness Theory, as described by Stuart Hall and Noel Ignatieff and Benilis de Silva, is about the illusion of race. Race is a social construct. There's no genetic, biological evidence to support differences between people based on what we see in our hair, skin, and bone, as Stuart Hall mentions, as race. It's aesthetic, really, is what it's about. Noel Ignatieff describes being a race traitor because he says, abandon being what you would call a white. You need to identify with others in order to understand and have community cohesion and remove the oppressive blocks to all kinds of stuff. He goes on at length. So my hope was to look at the way Indigenous people in different countries, especially Canada, had been studied over the last 20 years specifically, though I considered historically distant documents as well, and point out this problematic viewpoint of the separation between the researcher and the researched, the etic gaze upon the object of their research, that being Indigenous people, and basically what a mistake that was. I was happy to discover, in fact, that probably because of the intentions of most research in these areas, there were elements of this whiteness theory, raceless cohesion in in every article that I looked at, actually. I had to look hard sometimes, but to be honest, I was not disappointed to find that I could never find a complete absence of this approach. None of them was completely raceless either. Some came close, and that is just something that I would hope to achieve myself in the future. Well, I've recovered from my cold.
One face. Voiceover off.
But as I'm legally blind, I will need to use my technology to cover the notes from my paper. I will point out that at the end of each extract, my assistant tells you the page number of the extract.
The original reading done did indicate something unexpected about the research around this population. It was noticed that most of the research was done by researchers outside of the First Nations population. And in combination with the conversations mentioned above, a different approach to the topic seemed appropriate. To reiterate the comment that Ms. Desus, a Mohawk consultant, gave, she wondered why I wanted to do such a study when I was an outsider to the population. And then she pointed out the ongoing victimization of that population by the research historically. Her comment, and the neutral to negative responses of the contacted elders, social workers, and band administration staff, redirected attention back to the researchers and away from the subjects. Ultimately, it seemed best to use the pre-whiteness theory aware material as a sample of a standard research approach in this sociological area, and to see what whiteness theory had to say about the results. p. 14. Using Interpretive Research Synthesis. Weed, 2008, recommends first choosing 4 distinct articles for an initial comparison, which builds a breadth and context for the subsequent iterative comparisons via maximum variation sampling. Weed makes the case for this conceptual sampling, explaining the qualitative researcher's task of assessing the data to determine its interpretive value, not simply random or representative sampling for quantitative credibility. p. 15. Interpretive Research Synthesis Decisions Audit and Exclusion Criteria. The initial article choices were first selected by their distribution amongst the 4 literature categories I had created. To exclude research that was likely and suitable for this synthesis, I relied on a very simple technique of assessment using the article's very descriptive titles combined with my recollection of the article's general tenor. For example, I recalled noticing that Hong An was doing research on Canada while a scholar with the School of Foreign Languages, Learning Normal University, China, and that Grego, conversely, had impacted me with the depth of her on-the-ground research in the Okanagan. I recalled La Liberté Bell's Australian article as being a possible source of actual Indigenous inclusion in the program's development, after the title's rich appropriateness caught my eye, and would needed to be included simply because she'd done so much work on local First Nations communities that she kept showing up in my searches. I excluded numerous collections and literature. Reviews from this review p. 24.